do the Firefly one because that was added by me and then added by Lock On. So obviously it's one we both want to have a look at. This is Critical Drinker. Firefly, we didn't know how good we had it. Firefly's a great show, and it was cancelled after one season. If you don't know, it was continued in the comics by Dark Horse, which is basically season 2. And I have some of the later comics sort of toe the line of being like, is it really working with continuity? Fair enough. They got a movie to try and tie it up, yeah, and they got comics by Dark Horse. Because after season 1, it was left with a lot of loose ends. Boom Studios reprinted the Dark Horse comics. And that's these ones where they call it a Legacy Edition. This is book 2, this is book 1. I know it's mirrored. And they're really good. They're probably still the best ones for the comics I've read, but they were by Dark Horse. And what is in these is what I would imagine would have been in season 2 of the show. So, that's good. But yeah, Firefly's really cool. It's got a really cool mix of sort of Civil War, sci-fi, kind of very unique feel to it as well, which I really like. And the writing was really cool. Anyway, let's have a look what Critical Drinker says.
Back in the heady days of 2002, I was still a young and optimistic teenager, instead of the horrifying burned out husk of a man you see today, and I was flicking through the TV channels one day when I caught a commercial for a new show called Firefly on the Sci-Fi Channel, made by that guy who did Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
Now, I really like Buffy, but I have to admit, this Firefly thing didn't really grab me. It looked like some weird mashup of cowboy movies and the kind of low-budget sci-fi action shows that were all the rage at the time, and I remember thinking, I
it's
don't
weird.
get it. This looks weird and silly, and I don't know if I'm meant to take it seriously or laugh at it. And because I already had Farscape and Stargate SG-1 and Star Trek Enterprise to keep me occupied, Firefly just kind of passed me by. And by the end of the year, it had been cancelled anyway, so who cares? Just another aborted sci-fi show with grand ideas that never really got off the ground. Guess I dodged a bullet with that one, eh? Now, I'm telling you all this because people like me are the exact reason why Firefly never found the audience it needed and got unceremoniously cancelled by a network that never really believed in it in the first place. But having finally caved in and watched it with Mahler like 20 years too late, I can honestly say that is now a genuinely big regret on my part. Why? Because Firefly is a fucking awesome show with some of the best character work I've ever seen in a project like this, a fully fleshed out world of adventure and vibrant cultures brimming with potential, right in this light years ahead of the dull, flaky sludge we're subjected to today. A cast
Now I feel like rewatching it. Anyway.
of superb actors at the top of their game, and most importantly, a genuine passion from everyone involved that you can feel in every single scene and conversation. They really were trying to create something special with this show, even though seemingly everything was working against them, and there's something truly admirable about that kind of glorious failure. The show is set a few hundred...
It's well worth it, and you know, like, it's got one season and the movie, which is titled Serenity. So it's a smaller thing to watch. You don't feel daunted by the size of it. And then if you want to know more, there's still novels that come out for it, and the comics, as I said, but the later comics by Greg Pak toe the line a lot on whether I like them or not. I have to have a look if there's some newer ones from what I've already collected, but it's like, yeah, seems like they kind of forget about the continuity a little bit and just write what they want.
years into the future, where humanity's formed a single world government called the Alliance and spread out into the galaxy to colonize nearby star systems. Some of these tried to break away from Alliance control, which resulted in a galactic civil war that the separatists, known as Browncoats, ultimately lost. Now the outer colonies exist in an uneasy peace, where technology and culture have devolved into a kind of Wild West frontier mentality, and law and order is maintained by whoever has the biggest guns. It's in this world of danger and possibility possibilities that were introduced to Malcolm Reynolds, a former browncoat turned smuggler, and his ragtag crew who live and work with him aboard the Serenity. They spend their days taking on dangerous jobs that other people won't do, transporting illegal cargo, trying to avoid Alliance patrols and the cannibalistic space pirates known as Reavers, all so that they can scrape together enough money to keep the beat-up Serenity running. But things take a sudden change for Malcolm and the others when they're hired by a young doctor to transport his sister River, who's on the run from the Alliance and is, well, a bit strange to put it mildly. Clearly there's more to her than meets the eye, and as the season unfolds, the crew begin to realise that River might just hold the key to changing the balance of power in the colonies. Now, as I'm describing it here, it probably sounds like a fairly generic space adventure show, the kind of thing you've probably seen a million times before, but the devil, as always, is in the detail, and this is where Firefly really comes into its own.
Yeah, there's a lot of execution details that really make it special. Like, I really love Firefly. It's great.
First up, there's the characters. There's 9 people aboard the Serenity, all with their own unique personalities, goals, and motivations.
It's still in
many of
Callum.
which conflict with each.
Well, some of those are longer series, right? Like, Columbo's got a lot of episodes and that. But this, if you want a break from Columbo, have a little look at it if you haven't watched it yet.
Each other at times, and their various perspectives and ideals are what form the backbone of Firefly's dramatic arc. There's Zoe, Malcolm's second in command, an old war buddy who's always got his back, her husband Wash, the ship's talented but slightly flaky pilot, Kaylee, the engineer who somehow manages to keep the Serenity running despite all the punishment that it takes, Jane, a gun-toting meathead who's more interested in profit than teamwork, Book, a kind of travelling preacher with a mysterious past, Inara, a high-class escort who hitches a ride on the Serenity to get from job to job and has a will-they won't-they relationship with Malcolm, and Simon and his sister River, who are on the run from the authorities while trying to reconnect with each other. And here's the thing,
that's a really good way of summing up each character. He is selling it well here. Like, this video does seem like it's also for people that haven't seen it, so there's been no major spoilers yet. And yeah, he's selling it quite well.
Every single one of them is interesting, likeable, fleshed out, and complex. You get a good sense of who everyone is and what matters to them within like the first half hour of the first episode, but the more you learn about them, the more layers of history and personality get built up. Watching them spark off each other, trading quips and insults, reacting to ideas and situations in different ways, and even just hanging out and having dinner together, it all just cements the realization that, wow, they really did put a lot of thought into crafting these characters. And if you were to ask me who my favourite is, I genuinely struggle to answer because they all have something to recommend them. Jane is hilarious with his simple-minded pursuit of profit and gratification, never passing up a chance to indulge himself, but there's also darker moments where he's actually forced to confront the fallout of his actions, and you can see how much it shakes him. Malcolm's the consummate leader, always cool under pressure, smart and calculating but also free-spirited and adventurous, willing to take risks with his ship and crew, but fanatically loyal to the people under his commands. And believe me, he is not a man to be trifled with if you turn against him. Holy shit, a smart, capable and brave male lead who's also respected by his crew? You can tell this show wasn't made today, that's for fucking sure. And he's played to absolute perfection by Nathan Fillion, who apparently considers Mal the best role of his career, and frankly, it's pretty tough to argue with it. Then there's Kaylee, who I genuinely think might be one of the most lovable characters I've ever seen on TV. She's a brilliantly talented engineer who can fix almost anything, but she's also feminine and endearing and, well,
yeah, he's not
nice. Her quarters look like a teenage girl's bedroom, and in
yeah, I can't argue with the Nathan Fillion saying it's the best one. Yeah, he went through war, he's cool under pressure, but even other people like have different reactions to that. And it's not just that he's cool under pressure, but he, yeah, exemplifies that experience, I guess, too.
One episode where she's forced
as
to
well
wear a
as
dress.
Oh, why am I blanking on names? Names are the worst thing ever, because I have to try and remember them. Zoe also exemplifies that, but in a different way to Mel, and it's a really good contrast. Oh, I know you said Covenant. My brain's in Firefly now. He went through the war, and so did Zoe, and they're two different ways of both of them dealing with the outcomes of that, which is a really good other subplot throughout the
to attend a
series.
formal ball, she's delighted by the simple joy of just dressing up and looking pretty. If this was written today, she'd be some big burly lesbian with a crew cut and a bad attitude, obnoxiously complaining about how dumb the men around her are. We really did not appreciate how good we had it back in the day. But it's exactly this kind of nuanced character work, the ability to constantly surprise the viewer without ever feeling forced or mean-spirited, that helps to remind me that yes, Joss Whedon used to be really fucking good at this kind of thing. He gets a lot of flack nowadays for basically being the instigator of the cringe-inducing Marvel humour, and I've probably even done it myself, but I think that's doing the guy a disservice because most of the time it's not really his work that's the problem, it's writers of lesser talent awkwardly trying to imitate him to the point of parody. Whedon himself once described this show as 9 people staring out into the darkness of space and seeing 9 different things, and really I think that's the perfect summation of what Firefly represents. It's a show about perspectives, different ideas and mindsets, and how they conflict and work together. And of course, I can't talk about the characters without discussing the Serenity herself, which is basically the show's 10th character. She's a beat-up old freighter, a bit like the Millennium Falcon, designed not just as a vehicle but as a home for the crew, and it has what I can only describe as a coziness to it that was so unique to that particular time in entertainment. Nowadays, most sets are designed to be dark and moody and cool, and they all come across as so stark and nondescript that they're almost depressing to look at. The Serenity is the exact opposite, cobbled together and lived in and rough and ready. There's little details and Easter eggs everywhere. The sets were all designed to connect together because Whedon really wanted the audience to know the layout of the ship and where everyone was at any given time. And it's this desire to create a usable,
exactly. The others are like Apple product spaceships.
believable space that just adds to the feeling of a show that had a lot of love and care put into it. Obviously, not everything's going to hold up quite as well as the writing. This was a show made over 20 years ago on a not particularly big budget, so needless to say, the VFX are pretty janky by today's standards. There's a lot of recycled locations and props, many of the one-and-done sets look pretty bare bones, and sometimes the action set pieces are reaching for something that's a bit beyond their grasp. But you know what? I don't give a shit. I'd take a rough and ready show like this over some visually spectacular piece of soulless, corporatized trash any day of the fucking week.
Exactly. I mean, you can see there's low budget, but if the writing's so good and you can see what they were going for and you still have so much fun with it, it's like, yeah. And then if it took off and it was successful later on, it would have had more of a budget. But everyone seemed to, all the studios seemed to not like it. I wonder why. The good art ends up being low budget and companies and corpos don't like it. And too much budget can ruin shows, yeah. There's a good quote that one of my trainers said in college when I was studying film and TV, is that limitation breeds creativity. And so a lot of the things with the lower budget would have come about with some things that are different ways to write it, different ways the scenes play out, so that it could be done on the lower budget and still be good. And in some cases, that's probably good examples of times that was better.
Ultimately, Firefly's unique fusion of sci-fi space adventure with big thematic overtones and down and dirty Wild West aesthetics with gunfights and bar brawls and old-timey dialogue.
And you can see that all the time this is done for passion, for sure.
Was definitely a bold move from a creative standpoint, but in retrospect it was probably a bit too far ahead of its time for people to really understand what it was going for. This problem, combined with a pretty crap time slot and a studio that never fully got behind it, meant that Firefly never found the audience that it deserved. Fan petitions and online campaigns eventually persuaded the studio to make Serenity, finally giving Whedon the budget and resources to bring his vision to life on the big screen, but even that wasn't enough to save the show, and it was consigned to history.
So many memorable moments too, like the scenes play out as he's talking, and it's like, yes, I remember every single one of these, and I've watched it a couple of times now. Like, I don't rewatch things very often now.
15 episodes. And that truly does suck, because I feel like the whole history of this show was dogged by those two most terrible words. If only. If only the studio had gotten behind it more. If only idiots like me had been open-minded enough to give it a chance back in 2002. If only they'd stuck with it for another season. If only there hadn't been so much competition. If only. And when I think about all the absolute dog shit, brainless, soulless, pointless TV shows we get bombarded with today, that somehow keep getting renewed for season after season, that spend more on a single episode than Firefly got for its entire run, it makes me genuinely sad, because little by little, we're losing that improvisational spirit and the creative drive that made shows like this possible in the first place. We really didn't appreciate how good we had it back then, and probably never will again, and ultimately, Firefly is just another sad example of wasted potential, of missed opportunities, of what might have been. So you know what, Firefly? On behalf of myself and everyone else who should have believed in you but didn't,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
Deliberate,
you deserve
meaningful
better than you got. And in the end,
passion.
we're the ones who lost out. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.
Damn, that ending.
So you...
I think there's a lot of things too with it that is like... It's an example, isn't it? Also, because you end up with really good... Yeah, really poignant ending for sure. You get a really good series that is done with a passion, you get people that are working on it, it was low budget, and then it seems like it's not rewarded, and then when the big corporations come along, they put so much money into something, and it virtually is just, okay, hey, look at these flashy VFX to distract from her bad story and all that. It's like, ugh. That seems rewarded in the business world more than really good creativity in stories like this, which is upside down to how it really should be. But then also we get the same sort of thing of like George Lucas with Star Wars Underworld going, each episode was going to cost heaps and heaps of money. Yeah. And a lot of the stuff looks good enough. And I think there is a point where, like, some younger people, especially now, like, will go, oh, the graphics are bad, I'm not going to play that video game. Or, oh, that's old, I'm not going to watch that. And they miss out on so much. Yeah, the thing that really matters is story, and a lot of the time is also the actors and how it's executed. That was a good video. But it's like, like you're saying about Netflix cancelling things after one season. Some of the things in the first season are so good, but also I think like some things go on for further, keep going on for too long and lose what made them good, and they go on too long. Also, 2002 when this came out, I didn't see it. I was like, how old would I have been? 5? But I watched it later and it's so good, and the ad will play.